I think we're live. Welcome everybody to the stream for the 6th of April, a new week. I hope you had a nice weekend. I spent a lot of mine making a trough with a little greenhouse on top for growing vegetables in. Got our herb garden started. Vegetables are going to be starting soon. So please do let me know in the chat if you can see me and if you can hear me okay. Seems to me like everything is working all right from my end. Hello Olaf. Hi Lee. Hi Brian. Thanks for joining. That's great. It looks like we're all up and running and everything's okay. Now, I'm at an earlier stage in the painting process today than I would usually be, which is another way of saying that I haven't decided what to paint yet today. Except that I've already been around the garden just now and chosen some flowers that I might or might not be painting. Hello Renee. Hi Irene. Hi Priscilla. Hello Georgia. Georgia from Ohio. Thanks Lee, that's good to hear, thank you. So I'm going to set up the painting today. I'm in two minds. Like quite often when I start a painting, I think to myself, right, today is going to be a small, simple one. You know, and then I start playing around with my various little bits and bobs of crockery and vases and stuff, and before I know it, I'm onto what's probably going to be a 3-day painting. Actually, let me show you. This is the one from last week. The second half of last week. I'm pumping out 2 a week at the moment. So this was, I think, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I think I finished it on Saturday, if I remember rightly. Let's see if I can. I haven't set up the cameras yet today either. As you can tell, oh, the camera's there, yeah. Needs a little bit of twiddling though. Let's twiddle the camera a bit. You can at least see where I ended up with this one. It's interesting, this one, because it was personally for me, I think that's still quite loose. But it was at a very loose stage when I posted a photo of it, I think on Friday night. I still had a bit more to do on it. And a lot of people were saying, it's done, leave it. But for me, I still wanted to do some more. I think that's a pretty decent picture of it. So I changed a lot of the background around here. I went a bit lower value and I brought more chroma in there. Obviously I worked on the flowers and I worked on the teapot a bit, but overall I've kept it fairly light and loose. I've linked the shadow areas by keeping the same hue and chroma here, and I brought in a bit more violet in the shadow areas of the cloth to differentiate it. Finished off this bit down here, did just a tiny bit there. Mostly I was working on the flowers and the teapot. Really happy with how this one turned out. It's quite, in terms of the colour, it's quite restrained. I'm pouring my tea. Let me bring up the reference so you can see what differences there are between the reference and painting. Obviously the flowers changed quite a bit by the time I'd got to them. But that's how that one went. Thanks, Ginny. I had a nice but a very tiring weekend. I was determined to have a really restful weekend, but it turned out to be rather busy. Hello, Juliana from Ireland. Hello, Elaine. Nice to see you. So this one is coming off the easel now. Before I do that, I'm going to think about the subject, and I may not stream any more than just thinking about what the subject is going to be today. Let me show you what I've got. Actually, what I'll do is I'll zoom in over onto my still life table. I'm going to probably keep much of it set up the same. I've been doing a series of daffodil paintings for a while now. I think this one that I've just done was like number 8, maybe. An unbroken string of daffodil paintings. And I've been really enjoying it. And it's also, let me see if I can focus this in a bit better. Sorry if I'm making you feel seasick while I figure this out. And it's reminded me how useful it can be sometimes to work on a series of the same or a similar subject, the same or a similar way. Sorry, I'm just getting it focused. It allows you to, I often feel when I do a painting that I get to the end of it and I think I wish I had more time with the subject. I wish, I didn't feel like I got to do everything that I wanted to do, And doing things in series, it helps you kind of work through things and come back to the same things another day and look at them again. One of the things that I've noticed as I've been going around the garden the last couple of days is that the big yellow daffodils, they're starting to go now. It's getting to the end of the season for the big yellow ones. The smaller, lighter ones are still doing fine. And there's a lot of little white ones with orange middles popped up. So I'm going to be looking to do some of those later in the week, probably. Hi, David. Nice to see you. It's lucky I'm not actually on the camera at the moment because I'm going a bit red. I'm always very embarrassed by compliments. It's lovely of you to say so, though. What's this? I'm just catching up with the comments quickly. Irises and Gerber daisies. Yeah. Sylvia, is there anywhere that you can grow some? Even if you just have some in pots. Karen says, can you send us a photo of your garden? Yeah, I will actually. I'll take some photos of the garden and I'll post them up. I can actually bring pictures into a stream, so I'll be able to show them to you. Hi, Ellen. So let me show you what I've got. I've got these beautiful little flowers. The flowers are really small. They're mostly leaf. But the reason that I picked them up is because the colour is a really nice foil for the 2 daffodils that I picked today. And these ones come from quite a sheltered spot, so they're still all right. So I'm loving this combination of greens, yellows, and these just little hints. So if I was thinking about starting a painting based on what I've got here, this is one of my favourite little vases. The first thing I would do is decide on the height that I want the daffodils to be, and I do that by, it's going to come down to about the bottom there. So I'd want it to be about there probably. And the nice thing about this vase is that it has a very thin neck, so it supports the flowers. I wonder if I might not actually want much more than that. would be a very green painting. With just some little accents of violet. So this is pretty much how I put them together. Generally I spend quite a lot of time. I strip a lot of the leaves off as well at the beginning. I spend quite a lot of time just putting together flowers, trying them in different vases with different backgrounds. You know, it's the bit that you don't see. You know, the bit that you see is after this, when I take the photograph of the flowers. Once I've arranged them and then post it. Let me stand back and see how that's looking. The daffodil looks very nice. I don't like the way it's kind of sitting on these flowers though. Oh, it's poking up that way anyway. So I'll show you how I would use my viewfinder to kind of crop the composition. I'll put it in front of the camera. See if I can do that. Give you an idea. So you can see, like, well, actually, that's an interesting thought. Of one down here. I wonder how that would look. Let's try that with the framer. Yeah, that's tricky then, Silver, if you don't have anywhere to grow them. Juliana says, I'm a keen gardener. Love seeing other people's gardens. Great, yeah. I'll try and remember and I'll put it in the stream tomorrow. Paint some seeds. So I could get quite an interesting painting just with one flower at the bottom. How would that look? Maybe. And where this sits in relation to the light makes a difference. So if I put it back here, some of it falls into shadow. You see the cast shadow there is just falling onto the edge of it. That's quite nice. And it throws the, I'm going to bring the blind at the back down a bit to control the light. It throws the daffodil into relief a little bit more. It's going to be too dark now. Let's bring the exposure up. So I do a lot of, that's actually really nice how it is. I do a lot of messing about like this, trying to decide, you know. My viewpoint is slightly different than this. I'm just holding this up to show you, you know, how I would often frame them. I kind of like it just with one daffodil. With these other little flowers. Let's try that. Although I think I would want some more leaves. One of the things I like about the daffodil leaves is the way some of them flop over and some of them can stand straight up. I love that. From a compositional point of view, it's really nice to play with. I don't think I'll get anything else through the neck of this vase. At this point, if I can't get any more in, if I wanted anything else in, I'd be thinking about grabbing a different vase. Can't see these little fellas here. So the light is coming in, as you're looking at this, it's coming in from the left, from a large window. It's about 4 feet by 4 feet. It's a sunny day today, so I've got cool natural light coming down, reflected from the blue sky. Oh, come on. Doesn't want to go in. I've got too much in there, really, I think now. That might be too busy. So. Daffodil's in a weird position now. I don't want it sitting like that because I can't see the form of it. It could be pointing towards the light, or it could be pointing away from the light. I think towards the light is nicer though. So I would have that stem going off the top of the picture like that. So I've got light at the bottom. Let's try bringing the exposure of that camera down a little. Other way, sorry. I've got light at the bottom. I'm thinking about the composition in terms of values and whether the flower is going to stand out as well. So the cloth is showing up as being light at the bottom. And this daffodil. I'm thinking maybe one more daffodil. Maybe the other one wants to go in too. That's nice though. Yeah, they do, Olaf, don't they? The little purple ones keep moving away. Yeah, I'm thinking about putting that lying down flower back in again. Hello, Kathy, nice to see you. I was just explaining earlier on, I'm kind of at the setup stage, which is another way of saying that I hadn't decided on anything to paint before I started the stream. So this is how I set up my compositions with this. This is foam core, by the way. It's just foam core. Very light, reasonably stable. I think it looks nice, but I'm definitely thinking the other one wants to go in there too, which means I'm going to have to take a leaf out because the neck of this vase is too thin. The other thing I've got today, look at this, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Cherry blossom. I know I would like to paint some cherry blossom, but I don't have much time left because the cherry blossom is going to be finished soon. So if I was going to put this daffodil in, I'd want it lower and pointing that way. So for lower it wants to be, I'd need to chop it like down there. You go in there. I don't know about this standing up like that in the middle, it's a bit... Oh, get the cherry blossom out of the way. Typically, I can spend like an hour or two at this stage. I'm not convinced about it yet. I'm not convinced about the position of the flowers. I think it might be getting somewhere, but... That's quite nice though, what do you think? 2 flowers better than 1, right? Shears envy. Yeah, secateurs, if you please. They're a very serious pair. They're for once we get into rose season. And I know you do this too, Kathy. The roses will be out in everybody's gardens around here, and 1 or 2 might disappear. It has happened before, and arrive in my studio. My brush is coordinated. I see pink rounds and I think green filberts. Yeah, this is just Rosemary's botanical set. They're the only Rosemary's brushes I like. All the rest have fallen apart. I'm trying to decide if that's a nice enough subject to paint. Oh dear, I think I'm being stalked. That's quite a nice, what do you think? It looks kind of quite nice. And I can think about maybe more shadow at the back. So if I angle this, if I bring this further back, further into shadow, I might try, actually, if I turn this board around, you'll see this side is slightly darker. I have a lot of these boards, and I paint them. This is just like a piece of MDF that's been painted different, close to neutral values on different sides, and then I'll have something on the side to cast a shadow, you know, just to control the light a bit. It may seem a little bit obsessive, but I've never really had it happen that I just throw something together and it works. So I'm always thinking about the value balance and what shapes the value balance is going to make, you know, that might work in a painting. I think I prefer it with a darker background. Now my viewpoint will actually be a little bit higher than this. Just trying to decide if it might be nice to put some leaves in with it as well. Make some more interesting shapes. That's kind of nice. And they'll mostly disappear, those leaves, into the shadow, but you will kind of feel them, and it makes it a bit darker back there, which might work nicely. So I'm doing it from my point of view, and then I'm showing it to you as well. Because obviously the camera is at a slightly different point of view than me. I'm definitely thinking I'm going to go with the 2 daffodils though. Yeah, that's right, Olaf. I've got something light at the bottom and something light at the top. Yeah, I like the 2 flowers better too. And there's a little bit of that leaf that sticks right up, which actually goes light at the top, which is kind of nice. I'm not 100% sure I'll keep those leaves in, but possibly. The flowers are too far back and into shadow now, so I'm going to bring that back a little bit so they stand out, get more light on them. I'm going to have to do something with this beautiful cherry blossom before it wilts. I think I like it all, but I don't like these here. Coming out into the light. You're welcome, Irene. Irene says, thanks for taking the time to show how you design your subject. It's basically because this is just the stage I'm at now, but the flowers are standing out really nicely now against the background. See, I could just paint that. It just feels a little bit uncomfortable to me with the vase chopped off. I'm just trying to decide if I want those leaves in or not. And if I do, where are they going to go? The problem with them is they make such a strong shape against the white cloth that they're too strong. I think it's probably better without them. That's pretty nice, I think. Value balance is, I'm looking, actually, it's a good job you asked me that, Sylvia, because I'm guilty of using that phrase for different things, because I use it when I'm thinking about how I'm going to treat the values overall in the painting, and I also use it when I'm thinking it from a compositional point of view, and that's how I'm thinking about it at the moment. So I want those flowers, the daffodils, to stand out, you know, which is why I've got shadow in the background so that they pop out nicely. And then down the bottom, it's very light. So I've got light down here, and then I've got a little bit of the dark bars against the light background. And then up here, I've got light against the dark background. So it's kind of it sort of balances the composition. I'm really liking that, actually. And if I really drop the value of the cloth, then I think the flowers should stand out really nicely. Should we go for this? Keep the front end clean. Hello, Lisa. Nice to see you. Renee says, I admit when I set up a still life, I'm impatient. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's because you want to get started, right? You know, I've got a certain amount of light in the day here, and I really want to get started and start painting some stuffs, because that's the exciting bit when you're getting the paint out. But I think I'm going to go with this. I think I kind of like this. It's fairly simple setup, just with the two flowers, but I think I like it. I think, Sylvia, I think if I add the cherry blossom, I think it would be too much. Yeah, this is my favourite vase. It's old and dirty and has had water left in it and all of that stuff, and I love that about it. I do have these little leaves. And if I decide to, I can always add, they're very pretty, I could always add add a couple of those later on. They're from the other, those leaves are from the other plant in the setup. But even then, I think it probably, no, I think it doesn't need it. They look like little fish down there. I think we're all right like this. So the next thing I need to decide when I'm at this stage is the form factor, by which I mean, you know, if I've got a bunch of different sized panels, so I could have it, I don't know if I'll be able to show you this, but I'll try. This is how I do a lot of this as well. So that's basically, that's, you know, with that shape, okay? That's straight onto the camera-ish. So if I get another one, I can change the shape of the panel. You know, I could do it like a really long and thin one. Actually, that looks really nice. Because it's a long thing. Oh, I like that. You know, or I could have a wider one. I could potentially even do, you know, something really different and have it like there and over to the side. It would have to be bigger. Over to the side, something like that I could do. And if I've got it this way on, you know, what about if I had it, I've got some square panels, if I tried to do it square, might work nice. But I'm thinking so far, you know, if something hits me when I'm messing about with this, I'll probably go with that. And I think I'm liking the long and thin without too much space around them. You're very welcome. I'm glad you're finding this helpful. I mean, you can almost see a painting there, right? And I can move this forwards and backwards to decide like how much I want to show. I mean, I could be showing more of the cloth at the bottom or less. You know, I mean, the possibilities are pretty much endless. I think probably less of the cloth at the bottom, and I like the fact that as it comes up here, there's this light bit on the leaf there. I want that to be in. That's looking pretty nice to me. Now, I need to find a long, thin panel. And interestingly, the only ones I have are actually fairly big. These are linen panels. So let me show you next to the subject how big this is. You see that? So I'm going to end up painting it almost life-size, which is kind of nice too, because I'll have more room to work on those daffodils. I'm going to probably leave everything really pretty vague, except for the flowers. And the background, I'm going to give it quite a lot of chroma, I think. So I'm just thinking like, yeah, actually this is the same as the one that I've just done. So at this point, let's have a look, see if I can show you. I didn't mean to do that. I'm just going to set up a second camera, okay? Do it quickly. I'm just going to have to get in the way for a second while I... Oh, Studio Cat is here. Then if I go to camera 5 on the main one, usually I put the palette in there, but I can switch between them so you can see a little bit of the subject. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in any more than that. Let me let the cat in. He knows I'm painting, see, so he wants to come in. Hey, little man, you all right? We've got beautiful weather here, so he's been spending lots of time outside. I know you want to. I know. I need to bring up the exposure on that camera a little bit. And I need to get rid of that painting. I know, big fella. This is an awkward time for you to want to be picked up, though, because I've got to set up my panel. I'll try the patented cat sling. Can you sit in the sling today? That would be a big help for me. I need both my hands now. How's that? Right. Is that comfy? Here, look. Just putting Studio Cat in his little sling. How's that, all right? You can say hello to everybody. Shut up and give me a pat, he says. Hello, everybody. This is just a scarf, so I can be hands-free, you see, with the cat, as long as I make sure he's supported. We don't want you falling out, do we? Is that all right? This is also an important part of the setup, putting Studio Cat in his sling. All right there? You happy? I'm going to take this one down. And I just blue tack, because these boards are very light, I just blue tack them onto the panel, onto this drawing board. This one can go over here to dry. And I used to work almost entirely sight size, but because I do a lot of paintings looking down on the subject now, it's much more difficult to work sight size like that, so I don't so much now. What I could do with is one more camera, so I could show you the palette and the setup at the same time. Obviously, I don't have a photo of the setup this time, but I might be able to take a still from the video later, show you. Let's see if the... Is that all right? Can you see that okay? It's a bit dark maybe too. So actually, why don't I show you the entire process that I would be... The next thing I would do is find the exact local colours of those daffodils. Now, I have a pretty good idea, obviously, because I've been painting daffodils from the garden, but one thing that I've found, which has surprised me, before I started this series of daffodil paintings, is that there are actually very many different kinds of daffodils. It's a bit too bright. Sort out this camera a little bit. Colour balance is off too. Better, I think. And all of them have a slightly different hue, and I'm interested in finding out exactly what hue they are. So the way I start with this is I will get some Munsell chips that I think are probably pretty close, and I want to get the local hue. And there are two local hues in these daffodils. The local hue of the trumpet and the local hue of the radial petals around it. God, they're beautiful. I really hope I can paint them well enough. Another way you could do this if you don't have the Munsell book is just to... I'm trying to not get in the light. Right, big lad. That's actually quite close. This one is quite close. Possibly slightly more green. It's close. I think I want this, but higher chroma if I can, and possibly slightly lower value And the radial petals, that's good, but the chroma is too high. Which you do often do when you're trying to decide on the chroma of things. It's very common to see paintings that are too high in chroma. And here's the nice bit. Sorry, you're falling out there. Here we go. Let me bring the palette back up again. So of these two, this one was the closest. Although I thought maybe I wanted a bit more, maybe a little bit more chroma than that. That's 5Y812. So if I wanted it slightly darker and slightly higher chroma, the next thing I do is get the Munsell book. Again, this is all the stuff that you don't usually see me do at the start of a painting. But I always do this, almost always do this. Do you want down, big lad? He's looking with admiring eyes at my nice quality wool jumper on the chair. So I go to 5Y. And this will work for anything. I know people are curious about how you can use the Munsell chips in painting. This is one way, and it's the way I generally use. So this was the chip, right? 5Y812. So it would go there, and I was thinking it would be nice if I could drop the value and raise the chroma. There's a chip missing there, so let me put it in. Because I've got a lot of them out at the moment, and it's this one. Okay, so I can drop the value and have the same chroma, but I can't drop the value and have higher chroma. So if I want higher chroma, then I'm going to have to paint the value slightly higher. So I'm going to want to be around there for the local, right? Because this is what I call the chroma curve, and it's actually chroma and value curve, because if I put these two back in, there's one missing there as well. I'm not sure where it is though. But there's one missing here and obviously a few there. But as a color goes down the value scale, generally speaking, it loses chroma. Can you see the chroma dropping? This is chroma from grey to high chroma. You can see that's very intense and that's close to neutral. This is chroma. These are all the same value and the same hue. So if this was a purple red or a blue, the highest chroma would be around here. Let me show you a red. See, the highest chroma in this red is near the bottom of the value scale. The highest chroma in an orange, as you'd expect, is somewhere in between. The highest chroma in the yellow, right up the top of the value scale, which means that if I want the highest chroma in the lights of those daffodils, then I'm going to be up here, value 8. And I also want high chroma in the shadows, so I'm not going to drop the value too low. The value I see actually might be, the shadows might be down there, but I'm not going to go down there because I'm going to lose too much chroma. And also I know that the daffodils will work better in a painting if I keep the shadows, the shadow colours quite close. So I'd want that for my shadow colour. That for my light, probably between those two, and that for my shadow. What I need to do is I also need to find the next chip down here that's missing, because that might be a good one to have. But also, the other thing about yellows in particular, as they go in this kind of light, as they go from light to shadow, they move around the hue wheel, so it will go slightly, you could call it warmer, but I prefer to say the hue is moving around towards orange yellow. You see the difference in hue between those? That's more a green yellow. That's more an orange yellow. So I could do with taking my shadow colours from around here as well. And that chip also is missing, so I'll have to find it. It's because I've got loads of them around the studio at the moment because I've been painting so many flowers. But that gives me a rough idea of where I want to be for light and shadow. It takes all the guesswork and the mistakes out of it. Light, shadow. And they're very close in value. You know, it's difficult when you're in such a narrow value range. It can be difficult to show, to be able to show the form. Now these colourful tabs, this is, let me show you the cover. They're Munsell chips, and this is they're from the Munsell Book of Colour. The old version comes in 2 volumes, so this is like red, yellow, green, yellow, green, red to green, and then there's a blue and purple one as well. These days I think it comes all in one, and the chips aren't quite as good as they used to be, but they're still, you know, still good. You still use them. It is extremely expensive. It's like $1,000. You know, so what I did was I got the student book first, which you can get a lot more cheaply, which has very few chips in it, and they're just printed onto card. But then you can play with this method of working with colour. But just because I've picked these colours doesn't mean that so I've matched the local. You know, I'm very interested in getting the local right. I need a shadow colour for my radial petals as well, and they're 7.5Y. But it doesn't mean that I'm restricted to just these colours. You know, I can try darker shadows. Once you find where they are, you can move them around as much as you like, you know, if you want to. But for the shadow colour for those radial petals, I would have it about there, probably maybe a little lighter. Maybe this one. And the rest of it, a lot of it, I'll end up doing by eye, you know, in relation to these. So I'm going to want the background to be quite low value. All of this background area is it's very low value around here, you know. And I want these to really stand out. So that's going to be like probably like really low down the value scale, like down around there. But we'll see how we go, because the next thing I want to do once I've decided on these. Incidentally, the other thing about doing them in a very simplified way like this, just light and shadow, looking at the colour that way, is it helps you to simplify the form, which I personally think is, especially when you're working in narrow value ranges, is really important in order to still be able to make something that lives. And doesn't look just splodges of colour, you know. I need to be able to create form. I may go a little bit darker in the shadows. I should really see if I can find that other chip. But I think I'll be fine. I mean, that's enough of a reference for me to know where I want to be. So I've got them ready there. I'm going to put out a little bit of terpsin oil. Gonna have to look at my beautiful little cherry blossom another day. Actually, there's a painting. How nice is that? Ooh, I would almost put those away and start on that. But I'm too far into this now. See, for this is, as I say, is the part of the process that I don't normally show. But all the way through this process, I'm kind of mentally painting, making the painting in my head, you know. So I'm thinking about what colours I'm going to use. I'm even thinking about what brushes I'm going to use. I mean, it's all still up for change at any point, but all of this is the bit that you don't normally see on the streams. When I'm preparing things and making decisions, I've already made a decision about value balance, and now I'm talking about value balance in terms of the painting itself, how dark I want the background to be against the flowers, what's going to really make them stand out, or do I want a light painting overall with a light value balance, you know. That's a bit of terps and oil. Generally don't use the terps much at all, but I like the smell. Make sure the palette's clean. And if you've watched any of the other streams, you'll be familiar with the way I start them by now. Get some oil. Cover the panel. This is an oil primed linen panel, and this is just to give me a couch or a layer of oil to paint into. Or when you're, the sun just went in. When you're painting alla prima like this, I find I'm in love with this way of starting paintings now. The paint goes on so easily. You can adjust the edges really easily as you go. And the paint is just kind of flows around the surface, and you can, it's easy to change, but that there is too much oil. So the next thing I'll do is I'll paint an overall tone. And I've got reference, the paintings that I've just done are a kind of a reference for me for where I want this to be. So if you have a look at this painting, I've brought the chroma up quite a fair way in the background, and I know exactly what that hue is. It's slightly yellowish brown, you know, and that's actually what colour those shadows are. I'm going to put that somewhere where I can see it, so I can keep that in mind while I'm doing this painting, because I read something just recently where someone was saying that your last painting shows you what your next painting needs to be, and I think there's a lot of truth in that, or there can be a lot of truth in that, you know. And that's another thing that's great about doing a series of similar subjects, is each one is, I'm trying things slightly differently. So I also want, that's raw umber, which is a brownish yellow. Incidentally, let me show you something else. This is a really useful thing about the Munsell book as well. I mean, people think about Munsell, a lot of time people criticize it for being just matching, but it's much, much more than that. So this raw umber here, if I wanted to know, it's really important to know what hue your paints are, okay? Because that affects how you use them in mixes. With a low value, low chroma paint like this, like raw umber, it's hard to know. Munsell book to the rescue, right? So let's say, I pretty much know where that is. So it's going to be like a greenish yellow, okay? So you can go through, hopefully I'm not getting that, putting the book in the paint, and find where you think it probably is in terms of, I've probably already got it out, which is a shame. But let's say I thought it was about there. 2.5Y, so it's a yellow, orange, slightly orange yellow. Or maybe it's about here, this is 10YR. Slightly more orange. The reason I picked the dark ones is because raw umber is a very low value paint, okay? So I can get a bit onto a palette knife. I wasn't really intending this to become a Munsell stream, but it kind of is. And you can put a dab on it. Now it's darker than those, which means it's very low value, but it gives me an idea at least of which is the closest in hue. Can you see that? It's really hard to gauge. It's between the two. I suspect it's closer to this one. And a lot of people say raw umber is a greenish colour, and it's not. It's a yellow. It's an orange yellow. It's closest to this. I'm closest to that one. It's between the two anyway. Can you see that? So I know that when I mix this, when I add this to a mix, it's low value, it's low chroma, and it's an orange yellow. That's really helpful to know. Raw umber is a red orange. So if you've got raw umber and burnt umber. So if you've got raw umber and burnt umber out, then you can use those in mixes to drop the value and the chroma of anything that's on the yellow and orange side of the color wheel, the hue wheel, which is really handy information to know. And if you do that for all of your paints, if you're lucky enough to have a big Munsell book and you do that for all of your paints, it really helps you understand how they're going to work in mixes. Sorry, I've been talking a lot and not looking at the messages. Let me see if I can catch up with you. Oh, I just got your comment there. I was told once that all the paintings I did looking down were a waste of time. Whoever the person was who told you that should be taken out and shot. You should choose your own viewpoints depending on how you like them, you know. That's absolutely ludicrous, personally. I find that ludicrous. Oh, I'm sorry, I've been doing a really bad job of keeping up with everybody. Yeah, Ginia says she likes the long and thin. Me too. How is your thread attached to the board? That one is glue. So I made little holes with a pin and then put the thread through it and then a little dab of Yoo-hoo and it sticks really well. Yeah, I like it when I paint larger too, Marilyn. I've been doing more of that lately. It seems like there's more room for the brush marks to tell. Hello, Dayat from Indonesia. Nice to meet you. Miriam says, my problem is that I find a wonderful size using the viewer as you do, but then I can't find a canvas that matches. Do you have any suggestions how to deal with this? What you can do is get one that's something like close, put some tape or something down a side of it, so you know the size of the bit you want to lose. And then when you finish, get a jigsaw and take that strip off. I've done that before. It's a mess about, but yeah, you know, you can do it that way. Yeah, Lisa, thank you about the teapot painting, but I finished it on Saturday and I didn't stream then, so. Good morning, April. Yeah, it's warm enough to have the windows open here, actually. I should have done it. Sorry, I'm just skimming through quickly to try and catch up with comments. Hello, Carmen. Thank you, Mary. That's very nice to hear. The shadow colour, chroma is, hopefully I've explained that, but chroma is on a scale from very intense colour to very low chroma is near to grey. It's the bit that people often miss when they talk about colour. Great, that's good to hear, Renee, thank you. $1,000, yeah. But when you think about it, if you went on a workshop, you could easily spend that. And I've been using that book for about 15 years probably now, at least. And it's taught me almost everything I know about colour. This is Michael Harding Green Gold. Let's get back to the painting and I'll catch up with some more comments shortly. Michael Harding Green Gold, and I put that out because I know I'm going to want it for the shadows of the flowers, and I'm also going to use it in the background, and I want the background to go slightly, very slightly towards green, because that's how it looks to me, and it worked really nicely in the last one. Not too strongly, but a little bit. So if I pick up some raw umber, now I don't need to be too precious about the colour here, and I'll put a bit of white in as well. Sorry, forgot to switch cameras. I'm getting a bit better at remembering though, right? You want to see the palette probably too now, at the same time. That's quite high chroma, so, you know, that would probably be a little bit too much, maybe not, but because it's translucent as well. I'm not bothered about how that looks because I'm about to wipe most of it off. And what I'll end up with is a slightly toned panel with a layer of oil on it. And that's going to give me quite a, this is slightly different. I wouldn't usually have that much chroma right at the start. It's going to give me a slightly different I'll be able to, hopefully some of that will show through still, you know, and it's going to give a slightly different feel to the painting. So now I'm thinking about the drawing straight away, you know, so there's going to be, I know it's going to be lighter at the bottom where the cloth is, so I'll wipe a bit more out. My flowers are going to be like up here somewhere, and I can just kind of decide, compositionally speaking, where I want them to be, you know, not too high. And I can kind of relate the drawing to that, you know, decide where I want the main elements to sit in the panel, and then I won't have too many funny surprises later. The light's dropping a bit, sun just went in. It's a little bit in and out today, which is always a challenge, but I think I'll leave it for now, the camera exposure, and maybe see how we go. Thank you, Elaine. I'm glad you find that a little bit helpful. I think that's the kind of thing that you don't often see, even in videos as well. And sometimes I'm guilty of that too, of forgetting to put in some information that I should really share. So I'm drawing now. I'm trying to decide where things are going to go in the composition. It can, and everything can change at this point. So it's, you know, from that point, it's a view. It's quite good. That flower is too high in comparison to that one, so it would be. And some of these brush marks may show or not. I'm thinking about the trumpets mostly of these flowers. Actually, the top of that one would probably be. And whether or not an approach like this would work for you would depend a lot, to be honest, on, you know, how much you develop the skill of eyeballing positions of things. Which is something you can do, you know, fairly easily just with practice. So I'm just really roughing things in, trying to think about where they're going to go in relation to each other. So I've got a rough width, right? Let me show you how I'm looking at the subject now. I've got a rough width. So if I check like you know, I've got a rough width of how I'm thinking the flowers will look nice on the panel. So if I transfer that over here and check the width of these, and then see how many times the width goes into the height. This is awkward because I'm doing it looking at the camera rather than as I would look to it. And it's probably about twice, right? A little bit more than twice. Let me check it properly now. So I want the height from the bottom of the bottle to the top of the left-hand flower. That's what I'm checking. Yeah, it's a little bit more than twice. So if that was my width, that would mean the neck of the bottle would be about there. I mean, it's just kind of, it's fairly rough and rule of thumb, and the bottom of the bottle is going to be right the way down the bottom about there. And I think I can probably live with that. Maybe bring that up a little bit and that up a little bit. Which would then mean the width of the flowers would be slightly less. That should be about right. And this side of this, the vase, I'm calling it a bottle, it's a vase really, would come about there. This side kind of cuts through a bit more. That would be the neck. So I'm not, I'm just kind of trying to decide where things are going to sit from a compositional point of view more than anything. This leaf would be coming right off up there. I mean, I can change where that goes anyway. Some flowers coming out here. These little ones here. I think that would work. Have a little bit more space at the top probably than at the bottom. So I haven't drawn anything carefully yet, but I'm kind of being led by where I want things to be on the panel, rather than, starting to draw it exactly and then thinking, oh, I wish I'd cropped that differently, or I wish I'd set that up slightly differently. Does the Munsell tell you what colours to mix for the particular colour you find that matches your subject? No, but you learn that. And the books, for instance, when I started learning this way, and there's a kind of mixing that you can use called bracketing, which works very well with it. I'll show you it in a moment because I'm going to start mixing in a second. And you can actually use the book to find out if you have a target colour, as I do. I'm not guessing, I know where I want to be. So I can start to mix it, and then I can check and see where my mix is in the book, and that will tell me if I need to be lighter or darker, if I need to change the hue to be more orange or more green yellow, and if I need more or less chroma. So it's almost like, then it becomes like a map to colour that also helps with your mixing as well. Bonjour, Mirel. Michael Harding, green gold. Is it a mix of colours? No, it's a single pigment, so you can't create it. It's Graydon Parish recommended me to get this, especially for use along with quinacridone gold brown for the shadows in the trumpets of daffodils, because it allows you to get quite a lot of chroma. I'll tell you what the pigment is. I don't know of anything else that is quite like this, and no, you can't mix it because you won't get the chroma. It is, come on, tell me the pigment, Michael. PY129 Igrazine yellow. Here, I'll put it in. PY129 Igrazine yellow. So you can look that up. And if you come across Bruce McAvoy's handprint site, it will tell you all kinds of stuff about that pigment, which would be really useful to know. So I'm thinking about, now I'm at this point, I'm thinking about darkest dark and lightest light. The very lightest part of the painting is always going to be the highlight on the vase. The very lightest value you can get in paint is titanium white. I've roughly figured out the drawing, so I can kind of put that in. It's going to be about there. That's one of the main reasons for toning the panel, so that when I put that note down, it shows, rather than just disappearing, you know. And the darkest dark, let me bring the palette back. Bruce, is it Bruce McAvoy's? I think, let me check quickly. Yeah, Bruce McAvoy. So I'll put the URL of the site. It's like an encyclopedia of all the pigments known to man and woman, and what you can do with them in mixes. It's a very, very useful site. It's mostly from a point of view of watercolor, but it's just a good information overall. So my darkest dark is that, looking at the subject. If I bring the subject back up, trying to think about where my darkest dark is, and it's probably going to be like here and maybe there and down there. There's a little dark note down there. They're going to be the darkest parts, so I'm going to put those in. And I'm going to mix the colors because I'm working alla prima. If I was doing a grisaille first, then I could perhaps just deal with the values first and then glaze over them or whatever. But I'm generally a fairly simple person, and I like simple and direct things, and I like simple and direct painting. So at this point, out comes the black. Yes, I paint with black. And I'm also going to bring out, this is PY74 Michael Harding. He calls it Yellow Lake. It's Hansa yellow. It's a slightly greener yellow than a cad yellow. Probably won't, I might be using cad yellow today. Maybe a little bit in mixes, but not much. And I also want, this is a quinacridone green. Oh heavens, don't put that on the palette. Everything will go out of control. No, not if you're careful mixing, it's all right. It is very powerful. And the reason I'm putting this out is because recently I've been really using and enjoying Old Holland sap green. And then I had a look at the pigments the other day, live on a stream actually, and tried to mix it and found I could. And it was mostly ivory black. If you don't put black on your palette because of some mad idea that's going to ruin your paintings, you just limit what you can do. Much better to learn to mix. A little bit of yellow. And because ivory black is a low chroma blue, what I'll actually get is a low value, low chroma blue. What I'll actually get is a green. You see that gradually becoming green? And it lets me get a green right down the bottom of the value scale. If I want to add a little bit of chroma, it will push it slightly towards a blue-green. That phthalo green that I put out just now is Winsor and Newton Windsor Green yellow shade. It's also single pigment. And did I put the yellow shade out? Please say I did. Yes. They do a normal Windsor Green as well, so I'm going to put just a little bit in to give me some chroma. Just a tiny bit, because it's going to pull it too far towards blue-green. A bit of blue-green is good. And that is really close to what the sap green would have been. So I can mix that, so there's no need to have the tube paint. That's true, Susan. You can properly get lost in that handprint site. It's utterly fascinating. Utterly fascinating. Excuse me. So I want to put in my darkest dark. I usually, as well, when I pick up a fresh brush, I put a bit of oil on it and then wipe it off so it's worked in. Something I learned from decorators a long time ago. And I think the very darkest note is the corner, near the corner there of the vase. There's one here, and there's one just below this flower here. Probably about there. It's the stems. So now I've got my darkest dark and my lightest light in, and the first thing that I'm looking at is the background. And I'm wondering where in the value range from light to dark I'm going to place the background. Do I want a darker background or do I want a lighter one? And if I make the background lighter, then everything else needs to change in relation to that. If I make the background darker, equally everything changes in relation to that. I want a slightly darker background today because I want those flowers to pop. But even now, as I'm thinking that, I'm thinking, do I really, or would I want a lighter background? Or this is Williamsburg quinacridone gold brown, which was recommended to me by Graydon. And these two are good to use together because this is more green and this is more towards red, orange. So, but they're both high chroma and low value. So by mixing between them, you can change the hue and still get a high chroma in the shadow. So I can take it more towards green and more towards orange if I want to. It's nice. But for now, I'm thinking about the background. And I think I want it to be, I'm going to go for a lowish value high chroma background. So I've started with the raw umber, which gets the value right down there. I don't want it to be too high chroma, but... And the reason I'm coming up with this color, which is slightly towards green, is because I've done a lot of checking with, where have I put it, this. Holding it against the shadow in the background. Shadows are really difficult to judge. And that's another way that you can use chips. So if I hold up a chip like this in front of this, and I angle it to the light so it's exactly the same value as the background that I'm seeing, that can give me, I can get a really, a good idea of what the chroma really is. Doesn't mean I have to use that, but it gets me very close. So I think I'm going to want my background to be right down here. I can always lighten it if I change my mind. So I'm squinting right down and I'm just looking at shape and value. I'm not trying to paint anything, but I'm using this to kind of draw out the roughly to draw out the flowers. That's the top of the trumpet. Gets a bit lighter over this side where it comes into the light. Oh, my typed comments didn't appear on the Facebook stream. Oh, sorry about that. I thought they would. They must just be coming out on YouTube then. Oh, I can't put them on Facebook apparently. Oh, that's frustrating. It won't let me do it. They'll only come out on YouTube. Must be a limitation of the the online service I use to stream to both at the same time. But you can look that up, Bruce McAvoy's handprint site. And this is another nice thing about having this very slick surface at the start, is that it's really easy to make any changes to any of this if I decide that it's not coming out where I want it, you know. That trumpet is too low. So if that's the bottom of that one down there, yeah, I've got a problem. Instantly hit a drawing problem. Have I? Oh, maybe not actually. No, maybe it's not so bad. Let's see how we go. So because I've got this, because the vase is pretty much central, I can relate everything to that, you know, and get a good idea of where things should be going. That top of that should chop. We might be all right. So I'm just drawing by relationships, you know, finding out what is close to what. What lines up with what, where they go. Might get away with it. And I could, technically, I suppose I could do this site size, but it's difficult to work site size when you've got a top-down viewpoint like this, which is a lot of the reason why I'm not working site size. And I spent, because for years I've worked site size, and I spent a little bit of time breaking that habit. Because I was so used to working that way, it was difficult to work without it for a while, to work just by relationships. And the reason I did it was because I wanted to do these kind of looking down. I could angle the easel right over, but then it becomes difficult to get far enough away from it without climbing a ladder if you need to. So I went back to a more relational way of working. And I think possibly in some ways it's helped me to be a little bit more, whilst I'm still trying to get the drawing right, it's helped me to be a little bit more gestural, which I like, you know. From an aesthetic point of view, I'm going more that way now, and leaving a lot more brush strokes in, and finding that I quite like it. So as it goes over, the background goes over towards the right, it goes more neutral. So I'm going to quickly mix up just like a rule of thumb neutral next to it. That's ivory, black and raw umber, a bit more neutral, slightly lighter. As we go over here, there's a bit more white in it, drops the chroma as well. You know, the chroma drops, the value comes up when it goes into the light. And I get these deep shadows, and this is what I've been doing a lot lately. I did it with the last one, brought a lot of chroma into the shadow. So for this one, I'm actually dropping the value even more than I did before. If I'm lucky and I don't have to change the background, I'll still get this translucent effect in the shadows. So I'm mostly thinking things through and making notes at the moment on here. You know, I've drawn roughly out where they're going to go. I'm trying to set up the value balance and get that right. So I'm thinking about the cloth now. So to mix the colour for the cloth, it's slightly bluish violet in comparison to everything else. So I'll put out, in the light that is, so I'll put out ultramarine and quinacridone rose. I'm not onto the flowers yet. They may open a bit more actually, so I may not get onto the flowers today. And then bring that up to a much higher value with the white. But that, as it stands now, is way too high chroma. It's a kind of the bluish violet I want, but the chroma is way too high. I want a lighter version as well. So the cloth I want to be not light overall in the this is value balance, so I want it to be light in the picture overall, but not as light as the highlight on the bottle. In fact, I want it to be nowhere near as light. So the highlight on the bottle is pure titanium white. So I need to make sure that the colour I'm mixing here is not as light as that. Hopefully you can see that it's not as light, it's darker. I want to bring the chroma down because that's a bluish red. I can do that with black and raw umber, another neutral. The neutral doesn't have to be perfect, it just, you know, that's about the same value there. And it means that I can also, I can bring in more chroma or less and have a bit of variation in it, you know. And I'm gonna, one of the things I'm gonna kind of experiment a little bit with today is to paint the cloth darker in relation to the highlight on the vase, so the highlight on the vase little bottle kind of sings out. Mix between them, so I get a bit of the violet, but I drop the chroma quite a long way. So it looks kind of greyish going on, you know, in terms of the value, but that's right, I want it to look like that. And if I'm careful and I leave a little bit of this colour underneath poking through, you know, if I can get away with that and I don't need to work into that too much later, then that would be nice as well. It would kind of unify everything a little bit. And it gets, there's a darker bit. See, I can move down the value scale. So I've got chroma and then I've got value. Behind the bottle here, some of the cloth is shown. It has light on it, so I'm going to use that colour, but it's lower value than this bit at the front. So I'm just thinking about the value relationships of everything. Then there's a cast shadow from the bottle. And as this comes down into shadow, it takes on some of the takes on some of the colour from the bottle, I think, a bit of green. And also it goes it comes up in chroma. And it's closer to the background colour. Although not as dark. I don't want it as dark. I'm going to keep some of that violet in there too. Because it's on a lighter, this shadow won't be as dark because it's on a lighter surface. Don't like that brush. and there's a darker part of the cast shadow right here, but it's still lighter than that dark. So I'm thinking about the relationships the whole time. And there's a bit of light that shows through it. Where the light travels through the glass. Sometimes that's really light. In this setup, it's not that light. And up here is all shadow. But it's the cloth. It's not quite as dark as the background, but it's almost as dark. I want to differentiate it, so I'm going to bring in a bit of the violet. To differentiate it from the background. So this is, when I'm in setting up the value balance, this is what I'm talking about. Like, this shadow needs to be quite a lot darker than this, and almost as dark as this background color here, but not quite as dark. This is all just kind of trying to set up what the flowers are going to sit within, you know. And then I want pretty soon to be getting to putting some colors of the flowers in so I can see how they're going to work. And the other thing at this stage is just, you know, soft edges are a breeze when you're painting into a couch and it's still wet like this. Soft brush. This is quite a big one. It's flat. It says, I just looked at one of your other posts about the Munsell books. Oh, right, yeah. Very interesting, and it helps when I'm thinking about mixing. Yeah, I mean, it basically, if you look at mixing from a point of view of Munsell, and practice with it a little, it's not a silver bullet, then you kind of, you just won't struggle with mixing anymore. It's as simple as that, you know. I don't have a problem with mixing any color that I want. Choosing which color you want is not always simple. You see how easy it is to get these beautiful soft edges. You know, this is back in shadow, so I don't want a hard edge there, so I can just drag across it a bit and get a nice effect, and I managed to create this softness back there. Looks like the chroma is a bit high on that camera. Oh, maybe not. Maybe we'll leave it. But can you see how already that it's starting, you're starting to get a feeling of the light? As soon as the background and the ground goes in and then the cast shadows go in, you start to get a feeling of where things are going to be, how it's going to work. Just thinking about the vase now, because I've noticed actually a few people have been painting along with me on these, and what people do quite a lot is they paint the vase, the glass, as if it was something else. And what you really want to be doing is painting it with the background colours. Now this one, it does have a dark green base. I think that chroma is too high though. So I'll drop that with ivory black and titanium white. Mix it in a little bit lighter. So this I'm doing, but now I'm starting to work relationally by eye compared to what else I've got. So this actually down here is slightly darker than the background. So I need to be careful, you know. And then here, through here, I can see some of the background showing through, but the value is slightly lower. And it's tinted a little bit by the glass, you know, so it's slightly green. Where's the brush I used for that? There you go. And I would do that just by bringing a little bit of that colour of the glass in to what I've already got here. I've actually got this in the wrong place, so I'm going to wipe that out. Oh, the bottle's ended up higher than I thought it was going to. Is that right? It looks to be about the right shape, though. Can always change it if I feel the need. and I just want to get that shape in. I'm sorry I don't have a photo of the setup today. Hopefully you can kind of infer some of it. So when you paint the glass, don't paint it as a separate thing, just look at it as shapes, and it will be mostly the background colours that you're painting with. And if you approach it like that, if the values are right, then you'll find that you don't actually have to paint very much to make it appear to be glass. Once you've got a rough idea of the values in, a bit more green, dark around here. Soften it a bit, because the edges are they're not clear edges either. And then when you put the highlight in, if you put it in the right place, which I didn't, would actually be about here, it starts to look like glass. You don't really have to do very much, it just needs to be like the right value more than anything else. So I want to get an idea of where the flowers are going to sit in the painting now. Before I get too involved in anything else, I want to know if they're going to work. I need to take this value out here because that's just standing out too much. So this is where my chips come into their own. So I want something like this for the light part. You know, and I want to know that that's going to stand out. It looks like it's going to stand out pretty nicely. In the shadow side of the trumpets, I'm going to want something probably around here. Now I can't get anywhere near, I think that was the highest chroma I could get. I can't get anywhere near what I can see there. The values are very close between the shadow and the light. And I can't get the chroma that I can see there, but so I'll get as close as I can. This is where we're limited with paint. I need to be able to, I need a high value in the light parts, but I also want the maximum chroma there. You will hear a lot of people say it's like a thing that people say a lot. I think a lot of the time without thinking about it, that the highest chroma part of an object is in the half tone. From my tests with cubes and spheres of a single color, it's not, it's in the light, which kind of makes sense, right? Why would it be in the half tone where there's less light? It's where you get most of the chroma where most of the light is. So I'm going to bring out, this is PY3. This is Michael Harding Bright Green Lake. The pigment is PY3. I think it's an arrowline yellow. I may want some CAD, so I'm going to put some out just in case. So I've got 3 yellows there, you know, which is allowing me to have really high chroma from a more orange yellow to a more green yellow. The difficult thing about them is that these 2 are quite translucent, so they're difficult to get full chroma with. So there's a light part of the trumpet here on the side. Let me show you the subject again. So there's this is, camera's blown out now. Let me bring the exposure down so you can see it better. There's a light part here. So I'm looking at that and I want to get that in, and that needs to sing. And then I've got these 2 very light values on these petals here. They need to pop right out whilst not being quite as light as that. I can get them close probably and it will work. And this part of this trumpet is in shadow. So I've got shadow, light, shadow, shadow, and a little ring of light. Then I've got light, light, shadow on those petals. So I'm going to try and put those in, but I'm going to mix them before I do. Let's bring the palette up onto the main. And I'll put the subject in the little insert. Did that work? So you can kind of see, I can't get it any closer than that, unfortunately, but it'll give you an idea of what I'm doing and why. Oh, incidentally, the other thing about the comments is that I can't see, I'm streaming this to my personal profile and to the Art of Calm group that I set up recently as well, and I can only see the comments in one of those. I can only see the comments on my personal profile. So if you comment in the Art of Calm group, I'm very sorry if I'm not ignoring you. I'm not seeing your comments. So I'm going to go as high as chroma as I possibly can. Let's punch it right up for the lights. So I need to be really, really clean. You know, I need a clean palette. This is like the highest chroma you can get in a green yellow. So the Munsell book, by the way, I should have said, I don't believe I said that earlier on, is the range of color you can get in paint. Sometimes you can beat it a little bit, but not often. And that's why it's so useful, because it shows you not the range of colors in nature, which is much wider than what we can get with paint. It shows you what you can hit with paint. So you can see where you're short and where you need to compromise and where you might need to rethink values and chromas to get it to work. So I want this color. That's a bit washed out. Let me bring the chroma up. Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they, Susan? Williams, yeah, a couple of questions about the tube pigments I'm using. Titanium white, Michael Harding bright yellow lake, which is PY3, Michael Harding yellow lake, which is PY74, also called Hansa yellow. This is Cranfield, which is another make, very similar to Michael Harding in terms of quality, handmade English paint. Cranfield Cad yellow. Here I've got ultramarine blue and quinacridone rose, a blue-red. I used that over here for mixing the colour of the cloth. Michael Harding green gold. Sorry, this is Williamsburg quinacridone gold brown. I'll show you what colour that is by putting a little bit of white into it so you can see. Slightly orangish red. It keeps a really high chroma when you mix it. You go up the value scale with white. This is Windsor, and it's a phthalo green. Any phthalo green will do. But this is Windsor and Newton, Windsor green yellow shade. This is raw umber and black. So I don't put out anything I'm not going to need, you know. I've got some other colour in my paint. I don't ever have a set palette and put out the same palette no matter what I'm doing. I just don't paint that way. It's not how I approach colour. So that, I was going to bring up the chroma a bit so you can see it better. Yes, I think I maybe need to bring up the saturation on the palette a little bit and bring the bit blown out perhaps. Is that better? I think that's better. So you can hopefully see that this is, the value is too high, the chroma is about right, but it's probably a little bit too far towards green. This one is great, you know, the chroma is good. The value is about right and the hue is about right. Chroma is higher, if anything. This one, the chroma is good. The value is slightly lower and it's much more yellow, right? This one is possibly still a bit green. I think it's probably about right. I'm going to bring in a tiny bit of the cad yellow because it's going to give it a little bit of opacity. I think I've actually beaten the chroma a little bit, but this is going to go on translucently, so it's slightly frustrating. I'm going to put a little bit of titanium white in, which is going to drop the chroma, but it's going to make it slightly more opaque. So it'll cover a little bit better. And that's the light. For the trumpet, that's the light, okay? So the shadow color, I'm going to want to be, I wonder if that's a little bit too green. I think it's right. I think it's about right. You know, so I've gone a little bit more orange. So I can probably go in with this cad yellow, which is going to cover better, bring in the green gold. So I'm bringing the value down a bit. And it doesn't mean I'm tied to these colors and can only use these to paint the daffodils. I can add more colors, but these are like my anchor point. They show me, they keep me within the value range that I need to use and show me where I need to be. Okay, it's slightly, maybe slightly light. But they're really close, you know. I mean, they're only a value step apart. For showing light and shadow, it's a tall order, you know. So you've got to be careful how you paint, and I find it helps. That's about it. It helps if you really simplify it. And I generally use one brush for the light and one for the shadow, and I use like chisel flats. I'll switch the cameras around. I remember this camera's getting blown out of the main camera now. I'm just sorry, I'm just playing with the color balance because I've got it a little bit wrong here. That should be better. Yes, that's a bit better. It was a bit orange. So this would be my shadow brush. So pretty much the whole of this trumpet down here, which comes all the way back down to there, that's shadow. And there's a shadow inside as well. There. And although it's slightly lower value, I'm just going to paint it all with just these two colors for now. And then this one over here, like all of this trumpet is facing away from the light, so it's all shadow. It's substantially bigger as well than the other one. That's all going to be shadow. And if that looks slightly dull to me at this point, there's not a lot I can do because I'm going at the highest chroma that I can get, you know. There might be some mixes that could get an inch or two more chroma out of it in a mile wide piece of paint, but I'm not sure. I'm going to change the drawing a little bit there as well, tighten that up. I'm going to make that up a bit so I can show a bit more form. It's not actually like that, but light and shadow. So the light bit of the trumpet back here that I showed you earlier on is the light. So I'm going on thick because I want it to be opaque. I want that really to stand out. That camera's blown out now, I need to bring it down. Should be better. So I want this to be singing out like that. That's what I want, you know. And here I've got just around the trumpet, the frill is the high chroma part there. The light. And I'm not going to do any detail at the moment. I'm just thinking about like real general shapes. Because I want to see if the colours are going to work, you know. And then I can start adjusting anything that I think is going to need adjusting. There's a bit of light, like little bits like I could put in, like there's a bit of light showing here and I want to know if that's going to work. Little frill on the trumpet. So now I want the radial petals in. I can't really tell, you know, I'm thinking about the value balance as I go, and part of that comes from experience and part of it from the the daffodil paintings I've done recently. But I won't really know how it's all going to work until I've got these bits filled in too, so I want light and shadow for those radial petals. Oh yeah, Cindy, you've got some good replies there anyway, but yeah, no, that's not right. The chips are always included with the book. They're a part of the book, and that's the point of buying the book, is the chips. So whoever that seller is, they're not to be trusted. They are lying to you. Run a mile. So this is like a green yellow. So I'm bringing a little bit. I'm going to bring in a little bit of the card yellow because I'm about to put in this green, and that's going to drop the value a little bit, and it's also going to send it more green. So I'll put in a little bit of the card yellow to take it there to the right place in hue terms. I wouldn't always recommend, if you're learning mixing this way, that's not the most effective way to do it. I've actually, because I've mixed this colour a lot lately, I've got very, very close. Maybe one time I'll do a stream on bracketing as part of my colour course. I teach that way of mixing. It's really effective. This, we're going to want a bit of, but that's going to be too, that's an orange yellow, remember? So this is more green, so I'll bring in some of this green gold, and I'll bring it up to, I'm going to start bringing it up with one of the yellows. But it's low chroma, so I'm not going to bring it all the way up. When I say up, I mean the values. I'm going to bring it the rest of the way. I'm going to start putting some titanium white in it because I don't want the chroma to be too high. This is quite a low chroma colour I'm after here in comparison. And the value of the shadow obviously is lighter than the value of the shadow on the trumpets because it's a lighter local colour. The value is good. The chroma is a little bit high, and I think I want it to go a little bit more orange. And the best way to do that is with an orange, and this is yellow ochre, which is basically an orange yellow. It's a lowish chroma, mid-value orange yellow. So if I bring a bit of that up to the right value with white, don't just throw it straight in. I'm not going to do that because that will change the value as well. So I bring it to about the right value. That's a bit light. Actually, it's very close. A little bit light. Now this is bracketing. I'm bracketing the hue. I can bring a little bit of that in and it will pull it. It won't change the value because I mixed it to the same value first, but it will pull it slightly. It's going to drop the chroma a bit and pull it slightly towards orange, which is pretty much what I want. It's going to do nicely for the shadow colour of the radial leaves. But once it's in, then I'll step back and see and think, you know, what do I want to change for the benefit of the picture? And all of these colours are getting me in the right general area. So different brushes for the light and shadow again. I actually don't like this brush. I need something else. What can I use? Don't really, I need some more little chisel brushes. I'm kind of out. I'll try doing it with a bigger one. No, let's use this one. I don't like it because it's gone all sideways, look. But this would be my light. So I'm really interested in making sure that these light parts of those petals really stand out. Probably going to push the value a little bit on those in the very light parts. A little bit higher, but it still needs to be lower than titanium white. It needs to be lower than the highlight on the vase. I want them to really stand out against the background. And a lot of that will be hard edges, but it's also, you know, the value. There's light here. Light shape down here. There's a light triangle here. Those are the lightest parts. So then I can go down, I can mix between these, you know, to go down the values a little bit. Because all of this petal here is fairly light, but not all of it is the highest light. This petal back here is light-ish. Not quite as light, we'll go down a little bit there. I don't want to go too far down though, because looking at the relationship, it's this that shows the form of the trumpet to this petal here. I'm going to change it because I don't like the shape. I think it can show the form better if I change the shape. I'm going to pretend that it actually came up there. Which gives me a little bit of background there just to show the outline of the trumpet. Now back here, oh, I've messed up my brush. I've used the same brush for light and shadow. It's bad when I do that. This is shadow, and it's a cast shadow of the trumpet. This is all shadow. A couple of little bits here that are still in the light. I don't want to get too into painting them yet, but I just want to get shapes, you know, light and shadow. Because from what I've found, it will work. If it's going to work, it's going to work at this point. And if it doesn't work at this point, then I've got some thinking to do about the value balance, maybe the colors I'm using, all that kind of stuff. I need to be thinking about those. If it's going to work, it's going to work now in a simplified form, you know. If it doesn't, then I've got some thinking to do. So over here, this is all in shadow, this petal here. So I just pick up the shadow color. It helps you to be really consistent when you're modeling the form, you know. And hopefully that's going to come out slightly lower value than the light part of the trumpet, and we'll show it a little. Around here I've got shadow. That petal has moved, and it's in a nicer place than it was, so let's change it. Or I drew it wrong. Could just be that I drew it wrong. And the reason it's in a nicer place is because it's showing the outline of a bit more of the outline of the trumpet now than it was. That's all shadow. I'm going to deepen the value there because it's right away from the light. So I know what I mixed that with, so I can just bring a bit more of that in to get a slightly lower value version. Just real simple terms at the moment. This round here is mostly shadow. I can sort out the shapes a bit at the same time, you know. I can use the shadow to show the shape of the trumpet there. This petal here is mostly shadow. Got into this. And here there's light, but it's not full light. It's not as light as the very lightest part. So I'm going to mix between the shadow and the light. I'm not trying to paint any of the detail at the moment. I'm literally painting with two colors. I'm just modulating between them. I've got a lighter version I made there, and then I'm mixing between them here, you know, but I only mixed light and shadow. Real simple to help me simplify the form, and especially when these a beautiful little bit of light I'm going to put in just here. When these values are so close, you know, to show, you've got to be really careful if you want to show shadow and light. There's a bit of, what's really nice is there's a bit of reflected light bouncing back into the shadow here off this light part here. So I'm going to bring a little bit of that into, got the wrong brush, bring a little bit of that into the shadow. Just around here, there's a really nice bit of reflected light. I also want to bring down the value there a little bit. It's still got the reflected light, so I'm going to make it slightly orange. Just around here, please work. Right, so if I've done a pretty good job of working out the values up to this point and the relationships between them, then I should be, you know, if you paint this way, then you should be rewarded with, you know, a value balance which you can already see is going to work. If it kind of looks like you could almost leave the painting and you wouldn't have to do a lot more, and it shows light and shadow, then you know, it will work here. You should be able to see the form at this point. If you can't, then there's something wrong. In here, in there is a lower value shadow. So I'm going to bring in It's a slightly lower value and still higher chroma. So I'm just gonna, so you can see I can do this on the palette. That's my shadow color that I've used there. If I mix it next to the color there, then I can just kind of show that deeper bit of shadow in there and show a little bit more form. Hopefully not overdoing it. I'm at the maximum chroma that I can get at this value level. I can't get any more than I've got here. Soften some of these areas. Stand back time. Stand back and look time. Have a quick look and catch up with the comments first. Yes, Cindy, the thing to do is to look for the Munsell student colour set on Amazon is probably your best bet to find it. And I think I've been mixing brushes. And avoid the 4th edition at all costs. The 3rd edition is good. The 5th edition is usually okay. Certainly will be good enough to work with. Do not get the 4th because the chips have problems with the printing. Then get in touch with the seller when you found a 3rd or a 5th edition, or a 2nd, you know, if it's in good enough nick, and ask them if all the chips are present. If all the chips are present, check that they have stock in per version of the student book. And they are out there, and it's not going to break the bank to get them. I worked with the student book for about 2 years before I got the big book. And I learned so much even just in that time about colour. You know, everything I do now with values is based on what I learned then. I may ignore those other flowers completely because I kind of like the simplicity of just these two daffodils. I'm kind of tempted to not work on this painting too much more because it actually does have a kind of a nice quality to it at the moment. Just to show you quickly what I would do though is I would use like one of these little rounds, pick up the light color and just show you if the colors are good, you don't have to paint much. And bring some light in here to show the frill with an F, not a TH. And I usually just dab it on pretty thick. And the texture gives it a kind of a life too. No. There's a couple of bits around here where the light is showing. I mean, you can refine it as much as you want to from this point, and personally I think that's an aesthetic choice. If you like simple brushy paintings, hard edges, soft edges, more refined, less refined, all of that is your choice, you know. If your colours are good, you have a lot of freedom in how you want to finish a painting. I need a bit more cast shadow in it. That's one thing that's striking me at the moment. To the light. Yeah, Cindy, if you ever want to know anything about the Munsell stuff, either on my Facebook profile, ask me, or I've got some drawing problems, or email me if you have my email address. If you're on my mailing list, you'll have my email address. Just email me. I must be honest, I don't always get back to people quickly, and sometimes I don't at all, because I'm very busy at the moment, but I will try, and they're probably on my Facebook profile is the most reliable place at the moment to get me. Just very busy in a good way, teaching children and painting. That's right, Georgia, thank you. Yes, the 4th is bad. 5 is the newest one. Yeah, I have seen some of the 5th edition have minor problems with the chips, but nothing like as bad as the earlier versions. You will probably be all right with that one. I've got some drawing problems here. It's not looking very daffodil-like. I'm feeling reasonably happy with the colours, though. I think my little daffodils are looking quite happy and daffodil-like, sitting in nicely. Overall value balance, I'm quite happy with that. So, you know, I'm not going to go any further until I'm happy at this point. It should be coming more like... sometimes it's just because they move. I mean, they do move as you paint, you know, quite a bit. I could deepen the value even more in the background, but then I'll be down like here, so I'm not sure if I will. But hopefully you can see, you know, I mean, that gives you basically, at this point I've got a start that I'm fairly happy with. The daffodils are looking nice, the shapes are nice, you know, the overall value balance of the picture is looking quite nice to me. So I would be, I mean, I'm going to stop the stream now, you know, I'm going to stop for a break. I may do some more on this today, but it's more likely that I'll leave it. I'll probably take a picture of the setup, just as a kind of an insurance policy, just in case those flowers change an awful lot overnight. There's a good chance that they will, and that would potentially mean I'd either have to repaint them or I'd have to do them from imagination or something like that. So I'll probably take a photo because I've got the colours in. You know, I'm fairly happy with the feel of them. I probably will do a little bit more on refining the edges and the shapes, but overall I'm pretty happy with the value balance of the picture as a whole. I think it's going to work. The flowers are going to stand out nicely. It's going to be okay. Oh, Susan, what's that called? Lugwords. Very important for bees. Yeah, I've seen bees around those. We have quite a lot of those in the garden, and I've seen bees around them. Let me bring up the, just to finish. Yeah, I'll watch out for those then. I'll be careful not to take too many. So there's the subject, the painting. I'm going to adjust the camera a little bit because it's got a bit more blown out again. A bit overexposed, I think. That's better. So you can see I can't quite get to the values that I can see there, but by keeping this low, it sits in a good relationship to that, which there's still some room for me to bring up that higher. I haven't quite got, it's not very opaque, so I can get full titanium white there, and it will appear slightly higher value, which would be good. But overall, the value balance is pretty nice, I think. The flowers aren't going to need a lot of work past that point. I will do some more on them, bring in a little bit of detail, but they're basically working in terms of light and shadow, I think. So you got to see me do the whole thing right from the start today. How do you get the panel to stick to the wooden board? Just with blue tack. It's a light, thin panel, so I just blue tack it up there. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope there was some new stuff for you to pick up today. And I'll be back tomorrow, probably still on this painting. Yeah, I'm still in two minds about those other flowers. I kind of like the simplicity of this as it is now. There's something I like about this as it is now. I'm undecided about how far to take this one now and how much to add. I will probably add this stem that goes up here because I think it's important for the composition that kind of balance it and sweep up there. My bottle's a little bit crooked. This is the point at which I start, yeah, but I'll just do that. No, and then I'll just do that. I'll just do that bit and just do that bit. Because the thing is, whilst it's at this stage and it's all still wet, it's much easier to make changes than it will be tomorrow when it'll be dry. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you all again tomorrow. Have a pleasant evening.